Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and let's talk Shadow and Bone. So it's been a week since the show was out, and within that span of the week I managed to watch the show 3 times. So trust me when I say I have so many things that I want to talk about, and I noticed so many things rewatching it. So let's get into that. It's gonna be long, so just grab a cup of coffee. I got my own. So of course y'all know I only make these videos because I enjoy it. These are my thoughts and opinion. I am not a movie critic, I'm not a book reviewer. So you're free to disagree with me at any point, provided that it's constructive. Okay, so let's talk about the pros because that's the reason I started to watch the show. Oh my god, the casting was on point. I don't know how they found these people, but they are exactly who I pictured in my head. And every single actor did their absolute best to bring justice to these characters, and I applaud that. So I saw a few reviews and I talked to a few of my friends who watched the show and have been fans of the books. And yeah, the opinions were different. Some people liked it, some people didn't like the portrayals, and that's totally okay and I completely understand that. But I think the important thing to remember is when it comes to books and fictional characters, the best thing about them is that they're open for interpretation. So the way you interpret a character may not be the way that the actors or the writers or even the author interpreted them. Especially characters like Cass, who has a lot of internal dialogue in the book. So the way they interpret it is going to be different to yours because it all depends on your experience, your taste, your definition of morality, and so many other factors. So as long as they manage to deliver a stellar performance on their interpretation, I can appreciate that. And I certainly think that they pulled it off. It just so happened that their interpretation aligned with mine and I was able to enjoy these characters and their performances thoroughly. So let's start with the characters. Okay, Freddie Carter, who plays Cass Brecker, is born to play that role. I don't think anybody can ever top that. He's honestly the most difficult character to pull off in my opinion, especially because he's a man of few words. So in the books you have his perspective, you get to read from his perspective, so you understand the reasons behind those few words and what goes in his head during those long moments of silence and those moments when Inej is hurt and he's helpless to be there for her. So needless to say, Cass Brecker is one of my favorite characters, and not just in Six of Crows. So I wasn't ready to accept anything other than a stellar, fantastic performance. And I have to say that Freddie Carter exceeded beyond my expectations and I'm so happy for that. He gave by far the best performance on the show because the expressions, the intensity, and those piercing eyes that stare right down at you and make you want to reveal all your deepest, darkest secrets. It was perfect. So I must add that if you haven't read the books, you might not pick up on these because it was pretty clear that he and the rest of the cast had obviously read the books and they have embodied their characters. But especially for Freddie's character, there wasn't enough screen time for him to be fully fleshed out, which kind of happens in a first season because in a new fantasy series especially, like, you're building the world, you're introducing these characters, these different countries and religions. There's so many things that go into the world building part of it, so that takes time out of character building. But for all these new audience, trust me, it gets so much better because this material is not in the books. So I feel like what they did is such a good setup to what is about to follow, because this is very, very mellow to what these characters can do in the latter part of the series, because it gets good. That's another thing I want to talk about, that a lot of people had a problem with Cass Brecker not being as ruthless and vile as he is in the books, which makes sense in the show because he's not a psycho, okay? He does things for a reason, and a lot of the events that took place in the series in season 1 didn't require him to be dirty hands. Honestly, it made sense to me. If he had been ruthless and a complete, monster that we know in the books, it would have been totally out of place because he really didn't have to do that for anything that happened within the series in season 1. So I watched the show 3 times and there was not a single moment that I can point out and say, oh, he's out of character, Cass would never have done that. It's just so well written and so well performed that he nailed that role, and I'm so happy for that because it is so satisfying to see one of your favorite characters on screen just the way you imagine them. So next up is Nina and Matthias, who is the biggest surprise, by the way. My heart is so happy right now. Danielle and Callahan managed to bring out two of my favorite characters in the books and enacted them exactly as they are. Look, for most of my life, I have been curvy. I never experienced a thigh gap. It was a struggle trying to find clothes when your boobs and your ass is bigger than your torso. Trust me, like, I love the way I look and I love my body as it is. But whenever I see somebody who looks like me on screen, they would be defined by how they look. That's all there is to that person. Either they're too big or they're too insecure. It all has to do with what they look like, nothing else. So either they're the main character in that movie or they're like a side character that nobody gives douches about. So when I read Six of Crows, that's the first time that I saw myself in a book. So you might be wondering, what about Inej, right, in Six of Crows? And yeah, she's brown, like she's Asian, she's Suli, so that's the equivalent of Asians, I guess. But Inej is the farthest thing to who I am. I'm not a badass. I don't know how to fight with knives, and I've never known weightlessness. So it's very hard for me to relate to Inej. Just because she's brown doesn't mean like she's relatable. Although I really appreciate the diversity in Leigh Bardugo's books. But Nina is, she's loud, she's kind, she's funny, she's loyal, she's always hungry, and she knows how to take care of herself. And she's so fucking sexy, which is exactly how curvy women should be portrayed, because our lives don't revolve around us being plus size. And Danielle manages to capture all of that in the few scenes that they had in season 1. And there's Matthias, this big, tall Druze killer who is just such a softie at heart. I mean, their chemistry is undeniable. In my opinion, they had the strongest chemistry in terms of that. Like, Inej and Kaz were great, but I liked them individually more than together because they didn't really have enough scenes together for us to judge their chemistry, I guess. I mean, at least not for me. And I loved Callahan's performance of Matthias. Like, it was nicely done and the accent was very consistent, which I really appreciated. And I just can't wait for all these scenes at Hellgate. So there were a few people who had a problem with saying that Nina wasn't fat enough, or that that's not who they pictured in their head. And of course, she's not going to be exactly who you had in your head because she's fictional, okay? And the other thing is, we can't judge Danielle for not being fat enough because did Lee ever mention how much Nina weighs, how tall she is? No. So how can you possibly come to the conclusion that Danielle isn't fat enough to play Nina? And I hate that people are so fixated on that fact. Look at these pictures and tell me which one is Nina. The answer? All of them. That's the whole point. When I saw the original casting for Nina, I was a little skeptical in terms of the hair and the facial features, not in terms of whether she's fat enough, which I hate to even say that word because that's like completely disregarding women who are more curvy and less curvy than Danielle. But I decided to give the actress a chance to show her portrayal of Nina, and I must say I'm very satisfied with it. She nailed it and she was fantastic, and I'm so grateful that they chose her to play Nina, because some scenes between Matthias and Nina were word for word in the books, and the scenes and the expressions and everything they did is like me reading the book and the book coming to life. I do agree, for someone who hasn't read the books, their scenes could be short and out of nowhere. If you look at their scenes, I mean, yeah, he did just capture her, and you wonder how quickly then the dynamic can change so much in the course of like a few days. But understand that technically it was 3 weeks. But consider this scenario. Matthias is a warrior who had been taught his whole life and trained to hate and kill Grisha. He's been brought up in an environment where the Grisha is bad, they're abomination, and they're monsters. But through all of that, you do see that hint of kindness in him when he comes down to offer her food. Just a hint, right? Now picture him in a completely different environment with no one to influence him, no one to whisper things in his ears, and he is completely free to make his own choices, and then he realizes that what he's been taught isn't true and it's not right. And of course, yeah, that's not like 3 weeks is not enough for him to change his entire belief system, which makes sense, which is why he goes straight back to not trusting Nina when she says that intentions were good when she tried to get him arrested. See that he wants to trust her, but everything he knows is telling him not to. and it's called a schism. When you're at war with two sides of yourselves equally trying to pull you in either direction. All of this will make sense when you continue with the series, because you're gonna see, hopefully all of this will be explained because it is explained in the books, and I really hope they do a good job, because Matthias's story arc is one of my favorite in Six of Crows. Then there's Jesper and Inej. And Jesper, again, a pleasant surprise, and I really love his humor. He brought such a balanced comic relief to the show without making it really annoying and being that guy who makes like the annoying cringy jokes. And especially those two scenes he has with Inej are very pivotal to his character, I would say, because the first one you see him flirting with the stable hand, and then the other one at the barn, which are completely two different sides to him. Because the first time with Inej, he's very reluctant to open up and share his thoughts and opinions, so he diverts the conversation. But throughout the series, you see how their relationship grows, and when you get to the barn, he's actually more comfortable with Inej to open up and show his support and share his opinion. And that moment when he's so nauseous of seeing blood, but he makes that decisions to stay by her side, is ultimately what Jesper is all about. His loyalty, his friendship is something that all of the crows value. And then finally, Inej, one of my favorite characters in the show and in the books. Amita does such a fantastic job. Again, just like Kaz, I can't picture a better Inej. And honestly, like I keep mentioning, these people know their characters so well. It's pretty clear that they have read the books so many times and they understand their character enough to bring out these very intense emotions. Now when you think about it in the show's perspective, Inej is the only one of the crows who had a character development, where she starts off by refusing to kill and then ends up killing somebody to save Kaz's life, and inside a holy place of all the places. And her eyes convey so much pain and anguish, which is sure to pay off in the later seasons. And if you know her story, you know why that is. And for all the new viewers, trust me, you don't know her story yet. It's heartbreaking, it's painful, and what I can say is, in retrospect, her character is gonna make so much sense. And there's 3 scenes with her and Kaz that I can just watch over and over again. First time is when she's looking at the list of names of the fallen and trying to see if her family's there. And that's the first time you see her being vulnerable in front of Kaz. You see how Kaz is keeping his emotions in check and trying to tell her something that he's struggling to come to grips with himself. And then of course when she kills the Inferni, it's a short scene, and then when Kaz manages to console her without placing a single hand on her, that's the part where you understand their dynamic. And then finally the one near the fireplace, when he says, "No saints ever watched over me, not the way you have." And that draws a direct parallel to Inej's fate, which you see from episode 1, and you see how strongly she believes in it and how she makes choices based off of it. It's with that same intensity that Kaz believes in her, and how far he's willing to go, how his own decisions are affected by her. For example, him giving his shares of the Crow Club to Tanta Helene. Like, all these characters have great chemistry, and I really can't wait for more crows, like especially when Nina and Matthias join the fold. So now the Shadow and Bone characters, which I'm not gonna go too much into detail, but they are so much better than the books. I really didn't enjoy the books, so this is one of those rare moments when the adaptation is better than the source material. It was so good. Like, first of all, Mal, this was Lee's second chance to actually give this character a personality. I mean, Archie single-handedly managed to turn every Mal hater into a fan. He was so well written. I really enjoyed his scenes. I loved his character, I loved the acting, and I loved those episodes where he got a lot of screen time. I mean, the dude can act, man. I can't wait for more. So I say out of all the characters, Alina was the weakest. Not in terms of acting, because I really liked Jessie's acting, but I feel like she just didn't have enough to work with, because things sort of happened to her, you know. She didn't really get to make any major decisions, and she didn't really have anything to do except move the plot along. But I do like her relationship with Mal, which they managed to show off really well. They both managed to show that anguish and the earnest they felt being apart, and how much they wanted to get back to each other. And that one particular scene where she asked Genya to erase the scar on her hand, and at the same time you get to see Mal struggling to get back to her, even at the expense of his own friend. And then finally, the Darkling. Now this is the villain I wanted in the books. He is ruthless, he's power hungry, he's selfish, and he is so set in his ways that all he sees now are opportunities. and not people. And from what I saw in the show, he honestly doesn't have any romantic feelings towards Alina. I don't know if you noticed, but he always refers to her as the Sun Summoner in front of everyone, while he mentions everyone else by their name. If anything, he's in love with her power. He's not in love with her as a person. And then there's that scene where she visits him at night, and you have the romantic scene where she leaves and you see both of them on either side. But I don't know if you picked up on this, but just before the scene cuts to the next one, you see that he locks the door. So it's not a romantic scene. He just doesn't want to be disturbed again by her or by anyone else. And also, he never initiates any romantic gestures, but he makes sure to plant those seeds in Alina by repeatedly telling her how special she is and how powerful she can be. And he manipulates that longing that she has of wanting to belong somewhere. And I don't think he lies about his feelings. He just never expressed any, but he made sure that Alina did. I really love Ben Barnes' portrayal of the Darkling, and I really hope they continue on this trajectory because I'm excited. Every villain believes that he's the hero of his own story. That's what makes a great villain. They have to believe in what they do, and they need a strong motivator. But it's the choices that they make and the decisions that they take that ultimately make them the antagonist of a story. I mean, think about the two parallels that they drew with Darkling and Mal. When they killed his love interest, Alexander was ruled by his emotions. He made decisions out of hatred and anger and refused to heed Bagra's warning, which manifested into something so dark that eventually ended up creating the Fold. And similarly, Mal was ruled by his emotions when he decided to just storm off to the little palace when Alina was taken. But he decides to stay back after heeding his friends' warnings and making that rational decision to stay. He made the harder decision, but ultimately was the right one. It's the choices that you make which makes you either the hero of the story or the villain, and they have written really strong characters for both sides. And then there were these really amazing interactions between Shadow and Bone characters and Six of Crows characters. I mean, they all have such great chemistry. I don't know how they do that. So those scenes are either funny or like so intense, especially like Kerrigan and Kaz's interaction that a lot of fans wanted. Like, I was never into the Darkling, so I didn't really wanted them to interact, but it was a scene that I never knew I wanted. It was so well done. And when the Darkling uses the cut on Kaz Brecker, like the cut, that scene was so satisfying. I can watch it a million times and never get bored of it. It's one of the best. So also, this was a problem I had in the books as well. I really want more of Zoya and Genya, which again I didn't really get to see in the show, but their actors were really great. Whatever little they had, they performed it well, but I really wish I get to see more of that. And there was this one scene which I didn't like at all at the end when Zoya tells Alina, "I still don't like you," which makes absolutely no sense and so ridiculous because God forbid that two female characters get along in a show. So overall, this show is a 10 out of 10 for me, and I'm not ashamed to say that I'm completely biased because the Six of Crows duology has a special place in my heart. So I was wholeheartedly satisfied with this adaptation. And if you're just coming into the show without reading the books, I highly recommend that you give this show a chance and let them develop these characters and these plots, because it will take time, but that payoff will be so worth it. So that's it for my thoughts and opinions on Shadow and Bone. I hope you enjoyed this video. You can also follow me on Instagram. I am more active there. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video.